It's one small step for man.
Out for the out for the
And we're going to start off with AJ's Book Corner, the ABCs I like to call it. I'm reading a new book called This Side of Gone by Sandra Mitchell. Vinnie Taylor isn't a cop anymore. Once a decorated detective, Vinnie left behind a 25-year career in a blaze of scandal, working undercover to bust a sex trafficking ring in her own homicide unit. Nearly beaten to death by her former colleagues to prevent her testimony, Vinnie has found peace in the small town of Willis Harbor, Maryland, or so she thought. When a local teenager girl goes missing and nobody in town seems concerned besides the girl's best friend, Vinnie can't help but take the case, even if it means returning to a world she's gone hundreds of miles to leave behind. She feels a certain kinship with Avery Adair, a whip-smart teen who grew up on the wrong side of town just like Vinnie. But as she digs deeper, Vinnie uncovers a trail of dangerous online encounters and double life that Avery kept from even her best friends. The closer Vinnie gets to answers, the more perilous her own circumstances become. Does Vinnie have the courage to face the ghost of her past and the ugly truths hiding in her new hometown? So far, this book is pretty good. It is an easy read to me, but it is wordy. And when I mean wordy, I do mean that, you know how like some authors like to describe and paint the picture. This author does like to paint the picture for you. So if you do like people are like authors who paint the picture for you, this book is pretty good. Again, I'm more than halfway through it for now, and I'm almost done with it. But yeah, it's a pretty good, easy read. I like mysteries. I've always been a big fan of mysteries, and it's a pretty good one so far. The pacing is very good. And so yeah. So if you want to read this, you can. Jump right into this podcast episode. We're discussing the adverse effects of your inner child. I think I embrace my inner child, but I also know when to put my inner child to the side and be an adult. Usually when people talk about the inner child, they picture something beautiful and that part of your identity that, you know, that's free, spontaneous, creative, and full of joy. But if you spend 5 minutes with a 2-year-old, you see it perfectly. They are entirely in the moment. They tell you exactly what they want and how they feel with their emotions with absolute purity. But if you've ever tried to reason with a 2-year-old, though in a attachment room, you know that they can have the tenacity of a pit bull. They want immediate gratification and they don't care about adult rules or a protest. So as we grow up, the wild, impulsive inner child is supposed to take a backseat to adult maturity, but those basics never actually go away. And when life gets heavy, that inner toddler doesn't just wake up. It can completely hijack our mental health and wreck our adult relationships. So to kind of understand like the concept a little bit better, the article kind of talks about Sigmund Freud's the id, the ego, and the superego. And they talk about how the id is like the raw inner child, basically pure instinct, drive, and impulse. The superego is the moral compass, the inner strict voice telling you what you should do, and the ego is the referee caught in the middle, trying to balance what you want right now and what is good for you in the long term. But what happens when you are chronically stressed, you know, it's kind of like, well, what does happen? What happens when you're going through a massive life transition, dealing with like really big stuff? Basically, your ego, your mental referee gets exhausted. When the mind is emotionally overloaded, its capacity to tolerate distress plummets. To cope, the brain naturally looks for like immediate gratification or soothing, you know, something to soothe the pain, and it hits the panic button and reverts right back to childhood strategies to get its needs met. We call this psychological regression. The tragedy is that while these childhood survival tactics might ease your anxiety for a fleeting second, they create a vicious cycle of long-term psychological distress. When an adult constantly indulges their immediate impulses, they never learn to tolerate discomfort. Instead, you know, they're basically kind of masking and to protect a false mass of strength, you know, often using emotional volatile ammunition and stuff like that. So basically, we're going to look at the 4 destructive dynamics. So the first one is the tantrum king or queen. This is the adult who simply cannot accept the word no. When they face rejection or disappointment, they react with intense emotional volatility, crying, slamming doors, or radiating cold fury. The mental health toll here is profound isolation. When you react that way toward your partner or your friends, they basically start walking on eggshells. They give you what you want out of fear, not love. And deep down, you start to realize people are managing your emotions rather than connecting with you, which triggers an intense chronic anxiety of being abandoned. Second, the manipulator. Children are naturally brilliant at tricking adults to get their way because their egos are still developing. But when an adult relies on manipulation, guilt trips, or emotional chess games because they are too afraid to be direct, it carries a heavy psychological cost. Constantly contorting the truth to get your needs met is usually very exhausting. It requires an immense amount of cognitive energy, and it breeds a deep-seated paranoia that people are going to figure you out or see through your trickery. So the next kind of dynamics they're saying in the article are kind of like quieter ones. The good soldier. This is the person who is entirely intolerant of conflict, that they put on a brave, happy face no matter how broken they feel inside. This habit usually starts with a childhood as survival mechanism. I like to call this one the people pleaser, basically. Perhaps growing up in a hostile or unsafe home where the only way to stay safe was to be perfectly functional and uncommonly resilient. But carrying that into adulthood is a fast track to severe depression. Good soldiers completely neglect their own feelings to keep everyone else happy. See why I call this the people pleaser one? Because it's basically what you're doing. They hit a breaking point and completely detach, ending a relationship or walking away from a life before anyone even realizes there is a problem. They vanish because of the pressure of maintaining the mask because they matter of emotional survival. They're people pleasers, basically what it is. Should have called it the one that people please, not the good soldier, but whatever. All right, so then finally, the last one, the rebel without a cause. This is an adult who acts out behaviorally just like a sneaky teenager. When they feel bored, frustrated, or trapped, instead of talking about it, they seek a fix outside the relationship. They lie about where they are, engage in reckless behavior, struggle with substance abuse. The mental health reality of a rebel is eventual burnout. Running from your feelings through self-sabotage is physically, emotionally, and financially draining. It leaves you trapped in a loop of temporary highs followed by crashing waves of shame and guilt. So, when you step back and you kind of look at all 4 of these archetypes, they all share the exact same root cause: a profound fear of vulnerability. When you're a child, when you're like a child, you're like adult life is a defense mechanism, kind of designed to shield you from pain. Experiencing the of hearing no, doing the heavy lifting of compromise, or sitting in the uncomfortable tension of a conflict requires you to be vulnerable. If you use tantrums like manipulation, emotional walls, and rebellion to bypass that discomfort, you are essentially refusing to grow. And without that tension, your mind and your relationships stagnate. Basically, the psychological impact could have impact upon your friends, your family, your partner, and all of that. Eventually, those people have to figure out for themselves whether they want to keep dealing with you in your lack of growth or your regression. And I don't think I would want to deal with a person like that, to be honest. So the real question here is, how do you fix it? You kind of have to parent yourself in a way. If you recognize the tantrum patterning yourself, you need to practice the 10-minute, they say 10-minute rule, which is when an intense emotion surges, force a pause, take a walk, take a deep breath, remind yourself, I am feeling something incredibly intense right now, that kind of stuff. When you're the rebel, you have to learn to start telling yourself no. You have to kind of parent yourself, basically, is what they're saying here. Now, they do talk about how it's completely natural to regress for a moment when life gets overwhelming, but they talk about chronic regression being something similar to a prison. When you choose to tolerate distress instead of running from it, your reliance on these old childhood strategies fade. And that's exactly where your true self starts to become more confident and to bloom. So let's move on to what I'm happy and grateful for. Happy and grateful for being able to get back out into nature. I did take a week or so off, and I just kind of chilled and relaxed or whatever. So now I'm back outside in nature, and it's been nice. And I did have an additional day off, so I got to kind of like enjoy not having to go to work on Friday, so that was fun. The quote, let me see. Hopefully it's one I haven't done before, because I do have some good ones that I recently got. Let me see. The quote. When someone is drowning, it's not time to teach them how to swim. I like this quote because it tells people, to me, it reads to give people mercy and grace more than anything. I think that a lot of times people are like, well, you're going to learn a lesson from this. Well, if I'm drowning right now, I don't need you to teach me how to swim. I need you to pull me up on the boat. And I really do feel like some people, out of their self-righteousness, would go ahead and try to teach you how to swim instead of just throwing you the life jacket or pulling you into the boat. Not everybody needs to learn how to swim when they're drowning. Some people just need the handout. But before I go, be sure to check out the show notes. Also check out my books on Amazon, titled Poems to Cry to in the Dark and Love Letters Never Sent to Myself, and leave a 5-star rating. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I'm glad you're still here, and I hope you have the day you deserve. Bye!
One giant leap.
For